Sarah's compassionate decision to feed a frail old man cost her the job she desperately needed to pay her sister's medical bills. Hours later, her world shattered when the same elderly stranger returned, introducing himself as the new owner of the diner that had just fired her. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The fluorescent lights of Harlow's diner hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the checkered floor tiles and faded red vinyl booths. The clock on the wall read 3:47 p.m., that dreaded lull between the lunch rush and dinner service when time seemed to stretch like old chewing gum. For Sarah Bennett, this quiet hour usually brought blessed relief for her aching feet, but today it only amplified the gnawing worry that had become her constant companion. Sarah adjusted her blue uniform, smoothing down the white apron that had seen better days. Much like the diner itself. At 32, she hadn't planned on still serving coffee and meatloaf at Harlow's, but life had a way of derailing even the most carefully laid plans, especially when those plans collided with hospital bills that grew faster than weeds after a summer rain. "Order up," called Manny from the kitchen, his voice as weathered as the spatula he'd been wielding for 20 years. Sarah grabbed the plate, a standard blue plate special, nothing fancy, and headed toward the only occupied booth near the window. The elderly man sitting there hadn't ordered anything beyond a cup of coffee, which he'd been nursing for nearly an hour. His weathered hands wrapped around the mug as if drawing warmth from it, though the June afternoon outside was plenty warm already. As she approached, she noticed how his shoulders hunched forward, the fabric of his beige jacket hanging loose on his frame. His eyes, pale blue and clouded with age, stared out the window at the parking lot where a few dusty cars sat baking in the sun. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said, setting the plate down. "I thought you might be hungry." The old man looked up, confusion creasing his already lined face. "I didn't order this, miss." Sarah offered a conspiratorial smile. "It's on the house. You look like you could use a good meal." For a moment, the man's expression remained guarded, pride warring with hunger. Then something softened in his gaze. "That's mighty kind of you. I haven't had a home-cooked meal in ... Well, it's been a while. It's nothing fancy," Sarah said, gesturing to the meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans. "But Manny's meatloaf is the best in 3 counties. At least that's what we tell the tourists." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Thank you, miss. Sarah Bennett. Thank you, Sarah Bennett." He extended a hand, weathered and spotted with age. "Walter Harrington." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firmness of his grip despite his frail appearance. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Harrington. Enjoy your meal." As she turned to go, she didn't notice Richard Jenkins emerging from the back office, his perpetually furrowed brow deepening at the sight of her serving food to someone who clearly hadn't paid for it. Richard was technically the manager, though owner would be more accurate since he'd bought Harlow's from the original Harlow 5 years ago. He was 40-something with thinning hair and the permanent expression of someone who'd just bitten into something sour. He ruled the diner like a petty dictator, counting every napkin and monitoring the portion sizes with a jeweler's precision. "Bennett," his voice cut through the quiet diner. "My office." No, Sarah's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral as she followed Richard to the cramped space he called an office. It was really more of a glorified closet with just enough room for a metal desk and 2 chairs. The walls were covered in spreadsheets and employee schedules, all annotated in Richard's aggressive red pen. "Would you care to explain why you're giving away free food?" Richard Stone made it clear this wasn't really a question. Sarah straightened her shoulders. "He's been sitting there for an hour, Richard. He clearly doesn't have money for a meal. That's not your call to make. This isn't a charity, Bennett. It's a business. My business." "It's 1 meal," Sarah protested. Manny was going to throw it out anyway. "The lunch rush is over." Richard's face flushed an unpleasant shade of red. "That's not the point. The point is you made a decision that cost this establishment money without consulting management." Sarah bit back a more acidic response. Richard's establishment was barely staying afloat, largely due to his own mismanagement. The diner that had once been the heart of the community was now just another struggling business in a town full of them. "I'm sorry," she said, not meaning it. "It won't happen again." "You're right about that," Richard said, leaning back in his chair. "You're fired." The words hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Sarah stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Fired? For 1 meal? For insubordination? For theft of company property? For making decisions above your pay grade?" Richard folded his arms, a smug satisfaction settling on his face. "This isn't the first time you've bent the rules, Bennett. The free refills, the extra sides you've slipped to, the O'Malley kid. You think I don't notice?" Sarah felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Those kids are hungry, Richard. Their dad lost his job at the mill and Not my problem, Richard cut her off. Not yours either, not on my dime. Clean out your locker. I'll mail your final check. For a moment, Sarah considered begging. The thought of facing her sister without a paycheck made her stomach churn. Lisa's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and their landlord wasn't the patient type. But the satisfaction on Richard's face killed the impulse before it fully formed. Fine, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. But at least let me finish my shift. Donna doesn't come in until 5, and you'll be alone until then. Richard waved dismissively. I can handle a few coffee refills for an hour. Go. Sarah Sarah walked out of the office, her mind racing. 6 years at Harlow's gone in an instant. 6 years of doubles and graveyard shifts, of Christmas days and New Year's Eves spent serving others while her own life was perpetually on hold. All ended because she couldn't bear to watch an old man go hungry. She made her way back to the dining area, aware that Walter Harrington was watching her with those pale blue eyes that seemed to see more than they should. She forced a smile. "Everything all right, Sarah?" he asked, setting his fork down. He'd eaten about half the meal, she noticed. "Fine," she lied. "Just workplace stuff." Walter nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what kind of workplace stuff she meant. "This is excellent meatloaf. Please thank your cook for me." "I will," Sarah said, though she had no intention of entering the kitchen again. She couldn't face Manny right now, not without breaking down. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Harrington?" "No, thank you. And please call me Walt." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, transforming his face. For a moment, Sarah could see the younger man. He must have been handsome, with a ready smile and kind eyes. "Walt," she repeated, returning his smile despite everything. "Enjoy your meal." She retreated to the break room, a dingy space with a row of lockers, a microwave that had seen better days, and a card table surrounded by mismatched chairs. Her locker contained little: a spare uniform, a sweater for when the air conditioning worked too well, a paperback novel with a broken spine, and a framed photo of her and Lisa from before the diagnosis, their faces pressed together and grinning at the camera. Sarah changed out of her uniform, folding it neatly, though she was tempted to leave it in a crumpled heap. 6 years of her life deserved more respect than that, even if Richard hadn't shown her any. When she emerged in her street-clothes jeans and a faded t-shirt that proclaimed Riverdale Community College, the elderly man was gone. His plate was empty and a $20 bill was tucked under the salt shaker. Sarah stared at it, a lump forming in her throat. The meal cost $8.95. That was over a 100% tip. Richard was behind the counter, pointedly avoiding her gaze as he aggressively wiped down the already clean surface. Sarah walked past him without a word and pushed open the door, the bell jingling cheerfully as if to mock her. Outside, the summer heat hit her like a physical force. The parking lot swam in waves of heat rising from the blacktop. She stood there, momentarily adrift. The sudden reality of unemployment left her disoriented. What now? Lisa would be waiting at home, likely wondering why her sister was early. How could she tell her that their already precarious financial situation had just become untenable? Sarah took a deep breath and started walking. The 3-mile journey home would give her time to think, come up with some kind of plan. Something would turn up. It had to. She didn't notice the black luxury car parked across the street, nor the elderly man watching her from behind tinted windows, his pale blue eyes following her progress with thoughtful consideration. Walter Harrington took out his phone and made a call, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "I found her," he said simply. "You were right. She's perfect." The 3-mile walk home felt longer than usual. Sarah's mind raced with calculations, each more depressing than the last. Their rent was due in 10 days. Lisa's medication cost $350 a month, even with the patient assistance program. The electricity bill had that threatening red stamp across it. And now, no job. Sarah turned onto Maple Street, where the houses grew smaller and more tightly packed. Most had been built in the 1950s for returning veterans and their young families. Now they housed the town's working class, those who served food, stocked shelves, and cleaned buildings for those who could afford to live on the other side of town. Number 247 was a small bungalow with peeling white paint and a sagging front porch. The flower beds that had once been her mother's pride were now overgrown. Another casualty of time constraints and limited energy. Sarah paused at the mailbox, hesitant to check its contents. Bills didn't disappear by ignoring them, but sometimes she needed a few more hours of blissful ignorance. Inside, the house was quiet except for the soft murmur of the television. Lisa was curled up on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her thin shoulders despite the summer heat. At 29, she looked both younger and older than her age, her face still holding traces of girlish softness, but her eyes carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much suffering. "You're home early," Lisa said, her smile faltering as she took in Sarah's street clothes. "What happened?" Sarah considered lying, inventing some story about the diner being slow or Donna coming in early, but lies required energy she didn't have. "I got fired." Lisa struggled to sit up, wincing slightly. "What? Why?" "I gave a free meal to an old man who looked like he needed it." Sarah dropped her bag on the floor and sank into the armchair across from her sister. "Richard caught me and decided it was the last straw. That miserable, penny-pinching bastard," Lisa said, her pale face flushing with anger. "After everything you've done for that place?" Sarah shrugged, attempting nonchalance. "It's fine. I've been thinking about looking for something else anyway." The lie tasted bitter. In a town like Riverdale, service jobs were scarce, and those that paid enough to live on were even scarcer. "We'll figure it out," Lisa said, reaching for her sister's hand. "We always do." The "we" in that sentence broke Sarah's heart. Lisa hadn't been able to work for almost 2 years, not since the diagnosis and subsequent treatments had left her too weak to stand for more than a few minutes at a time. Yet she still spoke as if they were equal partners in this struggle, as if her contribution of courage and optimism somehow balanced Sarah's endless hours of waitressing. "Of course we will," Sarah agreed, squeezing her sister's hand. I'll start looking tomorrow. Maybe the hospital has some openings in the cafeteria, or you could finally apply to that nursing program, Lisa suggested. It was an old conversation, worn smooth like river stones from repetition. You've always wanted to, Sarah nodded, not bothering to repeat the equally worn counter-arguments. Nursing school required time and money, neither of which she had in abundance. Dreams had to wait when survival was at stake. Let me make us some dinner, she said instead, rising from the chair. I think we still have some pasta and that jar of sauce from Mrs. Petrovich, and Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet panic as she filled a pot with water. The severance check would cover maybe half of next month's expenses if Richard didn't find some reason to withhold it. She had about $800 in savings, emergency money that was supposed to remain untouched but had been dwindling steadily. It might buy them some time, but not much. She could call their mother in Florida, but that would mean admitting that she couldn't handle things on her own. Patricia Bennett had moved south after their father died, ostensibly for her arthritis, but more likely to escape the memories that haunted every corner of Riverdale. She sent birthday cards with $50 bills tucked inside and called on holidays, her voice always tinged with the guilty relief of someone who'd narrowly escaped a sinking ship. As the water began to boil, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. Hello? She answered, cradling the phone between her ear and shoulder as she dumped pasta into the pot. Is this Sarah Bennett? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Yes, speaking. My name is Margaret Winters. I'm calling on behalf of Harrington Enterprises. Our CEO, Mr. Walter Harrington, would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., if that's convenient. Sarah nearly dropped the phone into the boiling water. Walter Harrington, the man from the diner today? There was a slight pause. Yes, I believe Mr. Harrington did mention meeting you at a diner. Is 9 a.m. suitable? The address is 1470 Lakeview Drive, Suite 800. Sarah's mind raced. Lakeview Drive was in the business district, home to the few corporate offices that kept Riverdale's economy from collapsing entirely after the mill closed. May I ask what this is regarding? She managed. Mr. Harrington prefers to discuss that in person, Margaret replied smoothly. He did ask me to assure you that it's a matter that could be mutually beneficial. Curiosity won out over caution. I'll be there. Excellent. Please ask for me at reception. Business casual attire is appropriate. The call ended, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in bewilderment. The old man from the diner, Walt, was a CEO, and he wanted to meet with her? The pasta began to boil over, snapping her back to the present. Who was that? Lisa called from the living room. Possibly a job offer, Sarah replied, not wanting to explain the bizarre situation until she understood it herself. I have an interview tomorrow morning, see? Things are looking up already. The hope in Lisa's voice was almost painful to hear. Across town, in a penthouse office overlooking Riverdale's modest skyline, Walter Harrington set down his phone and turned to the window. At 78, he'd spent a lifetime building Harrington Enterprises, from a small manufacturing outfit into a diversified holdings company with interests in everything from real estate to healthcare technology. He'd made billions, lost millions, and regained it all through a combination of keen instinct and relentless work ethic. What he hadn't done was build a family. His wife, Eleanor, had died 15 years ago after a brief, brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. They'd never had children, a mutual decision in their youth that had transformed into a lingering regret in their later years. Now, with his health beginning to fail, Walter found himself surrounded by wealth and achievement, but little else. The Harlow's Diner paperwork is ready for your signature, Mr. Harrington, his assistant said, placing a folder on his desk. The current owner was quite eager to sell once he heard your offer. Walter nodded, unsurprised. He'd deliberately offered well above market value for the struggling establishment. And the background check on Sarah Bennett? Clean as a whistle, sir. 6 years at the diner. Before that, 2 years at the public library while she attended community college. She dropped out after her father died to help support her younger sister, who was diagnosed with lupus about 2 years ago. Mother moved to Florida after the father's death. No criminal record, good credit until recently. The medical bills have taken a toll. Walter absorbed this information, adding it to his own observations from the diner. He'd seen kindness in Sarah's eyes, genuine compassion, not the performative niceness that service workers often adopted. She'd given him that meal not for a tip or recognition, but because she couldn't bear to see hunger and do nothing about it. And Richard Jenkins? Walter asked, signing the papers without reading them. He trusted his legal team implicitly. Former owner of Harlow's Diner as of about 10 minutes ago, his assistant confirmed with a hint of satisfaction. We've arranged for the transition team to take over operations tomorrow morning. Walter nodded again, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. Make sure Jenkins is gone before I arrive. I don't want him on the premises. Already handled, sir. He's been informed that his presence is not required during the transition. Good. Walter closed the folder and handed it back. And Sarah Bennett's sister, Lisa, was it? What's her prognosis? His assistant hesitated. The medical records indicate her condition is manageable with proper treatment, but her insurance coverage is inadequate. She's on a waiting list for a research program at Memorial Hospital. Contact Dr. Abernathy at the Harrington Medical Center. Tell him I have a referral for the lupus treatment program. I want Lisa Bennett to have the best care available right away. Sir. Walter turned back to the window, watching as the sun began to set over Riverdale. In the fading light, the small town almost looked prosperous again, its worn edges softened by golden hour. He'd grown up here, in a neighborhood not unlike the one where Sarah Bennett now lived. He'd left at 18, eager to escape the limitations of small-town life, and returned only occasionally over the decades, usually for funeral. But now, in what his doctors delicately referred to as his sunset years, Walter found himself drawn back to his roots. The diner had been an impulsive purchase, sparked by a newspaper article about struggling local businesses. He'd gone there today out of curiosity, expecting nothing more than a mediocre meal and perhaps a bit of nostalgia. Instead, he'd found something unexpected, a reminder that kindness still existed in the world, offered freely without expectation of return. In his business life, such gestures were rare to the point of extinction. Everyone wanted something from Walter Harrington, except Sarah Bennett. She just wanted him to have a decent meal, sir. His assistant's voice interrupted his thoughts. Will there be anything else this evening? Walter shook his head. No, that's all. I have a busy day tomorrow. After his assistant left, Walter remained at the window, contemplating the small ripple of change he'd set in motion. He wasn't a man given to sentiment or impulse, yet here he was, buying a failing diner because a waitress had shown him kindness. Perhaps age was making him soft, or perhaps it was simply making him wiser about what truly mattered in the end. Sarah woke before her alarm, her sleep disturbed by dreams of falling and endless job applications that turned into snakes when she tried to sign them. She lay in bed watching the ceiling fan rotate lazily above her, gathering her courage for the day ahead. Whatever Walter Harrington wanted, she needed to make a good impression. CEO meetings didn't happen every day to unemployed waitresses from Riverdale. She'd spent an hour the night before researching Harrington Enterprises on her laptop. The company was massive, far larger than she'd imagined, with offices across the country and interests in dozens of industries. Walter Harrington himself was something of a legend in business circles, known for his shrewd investments and unconventional management style. There were few personal details available, just the bare bones of his biography. Born in Riverdale in 1947, graduated from Stanford, built his company from scratch, widowed, no children, nothing that explained why he'd want to meet with her. In the bathroom, Sarah assessed her reflection critically. The dark circles under her eyes had become a permanent feature, and her brown hair needed a trim. She didn't own anything that qualified as business casual, except for the black slacks and white button-down shirt she'd worn to her father's funeral 3 years ago. She ironed them carefully, trying not to wake Lisa, who'd had a bad night. By 7:30, she was ready. She left a note for Lisa explaining that she had a job interview and would be back by lunchtime. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. She still couldn't articulate why she was keeping Walter Harrington's identity from her sister. Perhaps it was simply that the situation felt too bizarre to explain. The bus ride downtown took 40 minutes. Leaving Sarah with time to spare. She walked the last few blocks to 1470 Lakeview Drive, a sleek glass tower that housed the local offices of several corporations. Harrington Enterprises occupied the top 3 floors according to the directory in the marble-floored lobby. At the reception desk, a poised woman with silver-streaked hair looked up as Sarah approached. "May I help you? I'm Sarah Bennett. I have an appointment with M.R. Harrington at 9 o'clock. Margaret Winters is expecting me." The receptionist's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing surprise before she recovered. "Of course, Miss Bennett, please have a seat. I'll let Miss Winters know you're here." Sarah sat in one of the plush chairs in the waiting area, feeling conspicuously out of place. Every surface in the lobby gleamed, from the marble floor to the abstract sculpture that dominated the center of the space. The other people waiting were all in expensive suits, absorbed in their phones or tablets. She resisted the urge to check if her shirt was properly tucked in for the 5th time. "Miss Bennett." Sarah looked up to see a tall woman in a charcoal suit extending her hand. "I'm Margaret Winters, Mr. Harrington's executive assistant." "Thank you for coming." Sarah stood, shaking the offered hand. "Thank you for inviting me. Please follow me." Margaret led her to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. As they ascended to the top floor, she offered no conversation, just a polite smile that revealed nothing. The elevator opened directly into a reception area decorated in muted tones of blue and gray. Beyond it, through glass walls, Sarah could see a large corner office with stunning views of the town and the lake beyond. "Mer, Harrington will see you now," Margaret said, gesturing toward the glass doors. Walter Harrington stood as Sarah entered, coming around his massive desk to greet her. He looked different in this setting, more commanding despite his age, dressed in a tailored suit that emphasized his still straight posture. But his eyes were the same, that pale blue that seemed to look right through superficial layers. "Miss Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Mr. Harrington," Sarah replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm, just as it had been in the diner. "I have to admit I was surprised by your invitation." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "I imagine you were. Please, Have a seat. He gestured to a seating area by the window, where two comfortable chairs faced each other across a low table. As they sat, Walter studied her for a moment. You're wondering why you're here? The thought had crossed my mind, Sarah admitted. He nodded, appreciating her directness. I owe you an explanation and an apology. I wasn't entirely honest with you yesterday. You mean about being the CEO of a major corporation rather than a man who couldn't afford a meal? A smile tugged at his mouth. Yes, that... I wasn't pretending to be destitute, but I was observing. I do that sometimes, visit places without announcing who I am. It gives me a clearer picture of how things really operate. Sarah frowned slightly. You were testing the diner? Not intentionally. Walter leaned back in his chair. I read about Harlow's in a local business report. It was mentioned as one of the long-standing establishments struggling to stay afloat in Riverdale's changing economy. I was curious, so I visited. My intention was simply to see the place, perhaps have a cup of coffee. I certainly didn't plan on having anyone fired. Sarah tensed. You know about that? I heard your manager's tirade. It was difficult to miss. His expression hardened slightly. He was completely out of line. Your act of kindness didn't warrant that response. Well, Richard's never been known for his people skills, Sarah said, attempting to keep her tone light despite the bitterness she felt. Walter nodded. That became abundantly clear. Which brings me to why you're here. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. How much do you know about Harlow's Diner, Miss Bennett? Its history, its significance to Riverdale? The question caught Sarah off guard. I know it was opened by George Harlow in 1952. It used to be the busiest spot in town when the mill was open. Everyone went there. Mill workers, businessmen, families after church on Sundays. It was the heart of the community, I guess. Exactly, Walter said, leaning forward slightly. My father used to take me there on Saturday mornings. The pancakes were the size of dinner plates and the waitresses knew everyone by name. He stood, moving to the window. Riverdale has changed. The mill closed, chain restaurants moved in, young people moved away. But places like Harlow's, they matter. They're part of a town's identity, its history. Sarah watched him, puzzled by the direction of the conversation. With all due respect, Mr. Harrington, Harlow's isn't what it used to be. Richard has been cutting corners for years. Quality has suffered. I'm well aware, Walter replied, turning back to face her, which is why I bought it last night. The statement hung in the air between them. Sarah stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You bought Harlow's Diner? The paperwork was finalized yesterday evening. Walter returned to his seat. Richard Jenkins is no longer the owner. Harrington Enterprises is. Sarah's mind raced, trying to process this information. Why would someone like you want to own a struggling diner in a town like Riverdale? Walter smiled. Someone like me? You mean an old man with too much money and not enough time left to spend it all? Before Sarah could protest, he continued. I grew up in Riverdale, Miss Bennett. I left when I was 18, determined to make my fortune elsewhere, and I did. But lately I've been thinking about legacy, about what endures after we're gone. He gestured toward the window, toward the town spread out below them. I've owned skyscrapers and resorts, tech startups and manufacturing plants, but I've never owned something that meant anything to me personally. Harlow's does. Sarah nodded slowly, beginning to understand. It's a connection to your past. Precisely. And I intend to restore it to what it once was, a place where good food is served with genuine care, where the community can gather. His gaze sharpened. Which brings me to the second reason you're here. I want you to run it. Sarah's jaw dropped. Excuse me? I want you to manage Harlow's Diner, Walter repeated, his tone matter of fact. You've worked there for 6 years. You know the operation inside and out. More importantly, you understand what makes a place like Harlow special. It's not just about food. It's about people. Mr. Harrington, Sarah began, struggling to find words. I'm flattered, but I'm just a waitress. I don't have any management experience. You've been essentially running the place for the past year, according to my sources. Richard may have had the title, but you were the one keeping the operation afloat. Walter's expression was calm, confident. Experience can be gained, Miss Bennett. Character is inherent. You demonstrated yours yesterday when you gave a meal to a stranger who looked in need. Sarah shook her head, still disbelieving. This is ... a lot to process. Of course it is, Walter acknowledged. The position comes with a substantial salary increase, $65,000 annually, plus benefits including comprehensive health insurance that would cover your sister's condition. Single quote, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Health insurance that would cover lease. It was almost too perfect, too convenient. How do you know about my sister? She asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Walter had the grace to look slightly abashed. I had my team conduct a background check before this. It's standard procedure before offering a management. I apologize for the invasion of privacy. Sarah wasn't sure whether to be offended or impressed by his thoroughness. So you know about our financial situation. I know the basics, Walter confirmed, but that's not why I'm offering you this position. I'm offering it because you're qualified and because you care about the diner, about the people it serves. He leaned forward. Take the weekend to think about it. Visit the diner this afternoon. My transition team is already there, assessing what needs to be done. See for yourself that this is real. Sarah felt overwhelmed. It was too much, too fast. The loss of her job, this unexpected offer, the sudden possibility of financial stability after years of struggle. And if I say no, Walter smiled, then I'll find someone else, but they won't be as good as you would be. Before Sarah could respond, Margaret Winters entered the office with a discreet knock. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Harrington, but your 9:30 is here. Walter nodded. Thank you, Margaret. He turned back to Sarah. Think about it, Ms. Bennett. The diner reopens Monday morning. I'd like to have you there, but the choice is yours. Sarah stood, still dazed. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Harrington. I will think about it. As she left the office, Sarah felt like she was walking in a dream. The elevator, the marble lobby, the bright morning sunshine outside all seemed slightly unreal. Had a billionaire really just offered her a management position because she'd given him a free meal? It was absurd, like something from a movie or a fairy tale. Yet as she walked toward the bus stop, Sarah found herself calculating what $65,000 a year would mean for her and Lisa. It would mean no more choosing between medication and electricity. It would mean Lisa could get the treatment she needed. It would mean for the first time in years they could breathe. But it would also mean accepting help from a stranger, a man whose motives she couldn't fully understand. Was Walter Harrington genuinely interested in restoring a piece of Riverdale's history? Or was this some elaborate game of charity that would leave her vulnerable when he eventually lost interest? The bus arrived and Sarah boarded it mechanically, her mind still racing. There's only one way to find out. She would go to Harlow's this afternoon and see for herself what Walter Harrington's vision entailed, and then she would decide whether to trust in this unexpected turn of fate or to continue struggling on her own terms. Sarah rode the bus back to her neighborhood in a daze, her mind replaying the conversation with Walter Harrington. The offer seemed too good to be true, and in Sarah's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, watching her father chase one get-rich-quick scheme after another until his heart gave out, leaving them with nothing but debt and broken promises. She got off the bus 2 stops early, needing the walk to clear her head. The June sun was high now, beating down on the cracked sidewalks. In her funeral outfit, Sarah felt sweat trickle down her back, but the discomfort was grounding. This was real. The heat, the concrete underfoot, the distant sound of a lawnmower. Whatever game Walter Harrington was playing, she was still firmly in her own reality. When she reached home, Sarah found Lisa sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. How was the interview? Sarah hesitated, then decided that half-truths wouldn't serve either of them. She pulled out a chair and sat down. It wasn't exactly a job interview. It was a meeting with Walter Harrington. Lisa's brow furrowed. Who's Walter Harrington? The old man from the diner. The one I gave the free meal to. Sarah watched her sister's confusion deepen. It turns out he's not just some random elderly customer. He's the CEO of Harrington Enterprises. Lisa's eyes widened. The company that owns half the corporate buildings downtown? That Harrington? Sarah nodded. The same, and he just bought Harlow's diner. Apparently Richard sold it to him yesterday. Wait, what? Lisa shook her head as if trying to rearrange the puzzle piece. So the man you helped is now your boss? Not exactly. He wants me to be the manager. Sarah's voice sounded strange even to her own ears, as if she were recounting a dream. He offered me $65,000 a year plus benefits. Health insurance that would cover your treatments. Lisa stared at her, speechless for a long moment. Then she laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Is this a joke? Some kind of elaborate prank Richard is pulling? It's real, Sarah said, reaching across the table to take her sister's hand. I was in his office this Harrington Tower, top floor, corner office with a view of the entire town. He talked about growing up here, about how Harlow's was important to him. He wants to restore it, make it what it used to be. Lisa's expression shifted from disbelief to cautious hope. And he wants you to run it? Just because you gave him a free meal? He says it's because I care about the place, about the people it serves. Sarah squeezed her sister's hand. He says I've basically been running it already. You have, Lisa agreed softly. You've been doing Richard's job for years without the title or the pay. She squeezed Sarah's hand back. So, what did you tell him? I'd think about it. Sarah released her sister's hand and stood up, moving to the window. Outside, Mrs. Petrovich was hanging laundry, the white sheets billowing in the breeze. He suggested I go by the diner this afternoon. His team's already there, starting the renovations. You should go, Lisa said immediately. See what they're doing. Make sure it's real. Sarah turned back to her sister, studying her pale face. Despite her illness, Lisa's eyes were bright with excitement. What if it's not? Real, I mean. What if it's some elaborate trick? Or worse, what if he changes his mind next week? People like Walter Harrington, they live in a different world. Buying a diner's probably like picking up a coffee to him, any impulse purchase he might regret tomorrow. Lisa considered this, her expression sobering. That's possible, but what's the alternative? Not even trying. Going back to job hunting with everyone knowing Richard fired you? She closed her laptop. We need this, Sarah. I know you're scared it won't last, but right now, we don't have the luxury of turning down opportunity. The truth in her sister's words stung. They were teetering on the edge financially. Even a temporary reprieve would be better than nothing. All right, Sarah conceded. I'll go see what they're doing to the place. She changed out of her formal clothes into jeans and a t-shirt, then headed back out. The walk to Harlow's took 20 minutes, each step bringing a fresh wave of anxiety. What if Walter Harrington was there? What if the whole thing had been some bizarre misunderstanding? What if Richard was still behind the counter, ready to mock her for believing she could ever be more than a waitress? As Sarah approached the diner, she slowed her pace. The familiar red and chrome exterior looked the same, but the closed sign hung in the window, unusual for a Friday afternoon. Through the glass, she could see people moving about inside, not customers, but workers in paint-splattered coveralls. A van marked Riverside Electrical was parked out front, alongside another labeled Culinary Equipment Specialists. Heart pounding, Sarah pushed open the door. The bell jingled as always, but the sound was almost drowned out by the buzz of activity. The interior of Harlow's was an organized chaos. The booths had been removed from one wall, exposing decades of grime. A woman with a clipboard was directing two men who were carefully measuring the space for what looked like new seating. Another team was examining the ancient grill, taking notes. No one seemed to notice Sarah at first, allowing her to take in the transformation in progress. The cheap plastic plants that Richard had insisted added atmosphere were gone. So was the tacky neon beer sign that had never worked properly. The counter remained, but its surface was covered with blueprints and material samples. Miss Bennett. Sarah turned to see a man in his 40s approaching with an outstretched hand. He wore a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a pencil tucked behind his ear. "I'm David Chun, project manager for the renovation. Mr. Harrington said you might stop by. I'm glad you're here. I have some questions about the kitchen workflow." Sarah shook his hand automatically, still processing the scene. "This is ... a lot of changes." David nodded enthusiastically. "The place hasn't been properly updated since the 80s. We're bringing in new kitchen equipment, redoing the electric light wasn't up to code, and replacing the booths with more comfortable seating." He gestured to the wall where the booths had been. "But we're keeping the overall feel. Mr. Harrington was very specific about that. No modernizing for the sake of it." He led Sarah toward the kitchen, pointing out various planned improvements along the way. New flooring, but in the same style. The counter stays, but we're refinishing it. The original Harlow sign is being restored. We found it in the storage room, covered in dust. In the kitchen, the transformation was even more dramatic. The decades-old appliances had been removed, leaving clean spaces for their replacements. Two men were examining the ventilation system while a woman made notes about the plumbing. "We're putting in commercial-grade everything," David explained. "Manny's going to love it." Sarah looked around, suddenly realizing she hadn't seen the cook. "Where is Manny?" "Taking a well-deserved weekend off," David replied. Mr. Harrington insisted. "He'll be back Monday for training on the new equipment. Same with Donna and the other staff. They're all getting paid for the time off, by the way." The generosity of this gesture surprised Sarah. Richard had been notorious for cutting hours at the slightest excuse. "Is everyone's jobs are safe?" she asked. "Absolutely," David assured her. Mr. Harrington was clear. The staff stays if they want to. The only change in personnel is at the top. He gave her a knowing look. "Speaking of which, have you made a decision about the management position?" Sarah felt a flush creep up her neck. "I'm still considering it." David nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "It's a big decision, but for what it's worth, Empar Harrington doesn't make offers like this lightly. If he thinks you're the right person for the job, he's probably right." Sarah spent the next hour with David, discussing everything from menu updates to staff schedules. To her surprise, he genuinely valued her input, making notes and occasionally adjusting plans based on her suggestions. "The local high school crowd comes in around 3:30, she explained as they reviewed the proposed hours of operation. "If we close at 3 o'clock on weekdays like this, says we'll lose that business." David immediately revised the schedule. "Good catch, Mr. Harrington wants this place to serve the community, not just the morning coffee crowd." By the time Sarah left the diner, the sun was beginning to set. The day had passed in a blur of blueprints and decisions, each one making the opportunity feel more real. As she walked home, Sarah felt a cautious optimism taking. Maybe this wasn't too good to be true. Maybe it was just good, period. Lisa was waiting on the porch when Sarah arrived, a rare sight given how the heat usually exacerbated her symptom. Her face was eager, expectant. "Well?" she prompted as Sarah climbed the steps. Sarah couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. "It's real. They're renovating the whole place. New kitchen, new booths. Everything. And everyone's keeping their jobs. They're even being paid while the diner's closed." Lisa's eyes shone. "Did you see him, Harrington?" "No, just his project manager." Sarah sat beside her sister on the porch swing, but his influence was everywhere. "He's spending a fortune on this place, Lisa. Way more than it could ever make back." "So what are you going to do?" Lisa asked, her voice soft. Sarah watched as a firefly lit up in the gathering dusk. "I'm going to say yes," she decided, the words feeling right as she spoke them. "I don't know what Walter Harrington's game is, but I know Harlow's. I know what it could be with the right support. And I know what that salary could mean for us." Lisa leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder, a gesture of both affection and relief. "I think Dad would be proud. He always said you were meant for more than just taking orders." The mention of their father brought a lump to Sarah's throat. He'd been a dreamer, always chasing the next big thing. But unlike his schemes, this opportunity had come to her not because she'd pursued it, but because she'd done what came naturally, showing kindness to someone in need. "I'll call Margaret Winters tomorrow," Sarah said, putting an arm around her sister. "Let her know I'm accepting the position." For the first time in years, the future held more promise than dread. Whatever Walter Harrington's reasons for buying Harlow's, whatever his interest in her, Sarah would make the most of this chance. She would turn the diner into what it should be, what it once was. A place where good food was served with genuine care, where the community could gather. And maybe, just maybe, she would finally stop living paycheck to paycheck, stop making impossible choices between bills and medicine, between her sister's needs and her own dreams. As the sisters sat in companionable silence, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a life not defined by scarcity and struggle. It felt strange, almost forbidden, like trying on clothes she could never afford, but also undeniably like coming home. Saturday morning found Sarah at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad, making lists. Old habits died hard. She'd been making lists since she was a teenager, finding comfort in the orderly rows of tasks that could be neatly crossed out when completed. Today's list was different, though. Instead of buy groceries and call about electric bill, she was writing review staff schedules and finalize menu updates. She had called Margaret Winters first thing, her voice steady as she accepted the position. Margaret hadn't seemed surprised, merely efficient, informing Sarah that the necessary paperwork would be emailed to her and that she was expected at the diner at 8 o'clock Monday morning for the staff meeting before reopening. Now Sarah was trying to organize her thoughts to prepare for the monumental shift from employee to manager. She'd known Harlow's operations inside and out as a waitress, but being responsible for the entire business was another matter entirely. "You're overthinking this," Lisa said, appearing in the doorway in her bathrobe. She looked better this morning. There was color in her cheeks, and she moved with slightly more energy than usual. "Probably," Sarah admitted, tapping her pen against the legal pad, "but I've never done anything like this before. I don't want to mess it up." Lisa poured herself a cup of coffee and joined her at the table. "You won't. You've practically ran that place already." She glanced at the pad. "What are you working on?" "Ideas for the menu. David mentioned yesterday that they want to update it, but keep the classics." Sarah pushed the pad toward her sister. "What do you think?" Lisa scanned the list, nodding appreciatively. "Seasonal specials are a good idea, and I like that you're keeping Manny's meatloaf. That's sacred. It's the one thing that never declined in quality, even under Richard's reign of cheapness." Sarah agreed. "But we need more options for people with dietary restrictions. Vegetarian, gluten-free, that kind of thing." "Look at you, thinking like a real restaurant manager," Lisa teased, but her eyes were proud. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number she didn't recognize. * Miss Bennett. "Walter Harrington here. Wondering if you might be available to meet me at the diner this afternoon. There are a few things I'd like to discuss before Monday. 2 p.m. would work well for me. **. Sarah stared at the message, a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She hadn't expected to see Walter again until the reopening. "What is it?" Lisa asked, noticing her expression. "It's him, Walter. He wants to meet at the diner this afternoon." Lisa's eyes widened. "Are you going to go?" "I guess I have to. He's my boss now," Sarah replied, typing out a response. **, I'll be there at 2 p.m. **, the reply came immediately. **, excellent. Looking forward to it. **. The formality of the exchange made Sarah smile despite her nervousness. She imagined Walter Harrington, billionaire CEO, carefully typing out text messages with his aged fingers, probably using a single index finger to peck at the screen. "I should get dressed," she said, standing up. "If I'm going to meet with the big boss, I should probably not look like I just rolled out of bed." "Wear the blue blouse," Lisa suggested. "It brings out your eyes." Sarah spent the morning cleaning the house, another habit born of anxiety, and then took Lisa to her monthly checkup at the clinic. The doctor was pleased with her latest blood work, though he reminded them that Lisa needed to start the new treatment regimen soon. Sarah bit her tongue to keep from mentioning that this might finally be possible, not wanting to jinx the new job before it officially began. At 1:30, she left Lisa resting and walked to the diner. The day was cooler than yesterday, a gentle breeze making the walk pleasant. As she approached Harlow's, Sarah noticed that the exterior had already undergone a transformation. The faded awning had been replaced with a crisp new one in the same classic red. The windows gleamed, free of the grime that had accumulated over years of neglect. Even the parking lot had been repaved, the fresh asphalt dark and smooth. A sleek black car was parked out front Walter, she assumed. Inside, the diner was quiet, the weekend renovation crew apparently given the afternoon off. The interior changes were even more apparent in the stillness. The new booths had been installed along the wall, their red vinyl seats gleaming. The counter had been refinished, restored to its original luster. The floor tiles, once dingy with years of ground and dirt, now shone under the overhead lights. Walter sat at the counter, a folder open in front of him. He looked up as the bell announced her arrival, and his face creased in a smile. "Ms. Bennett," he said, standing to greet her. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Harrington," Sarah replied, shaking his offered hand. Today he wore casual clothes, khakis, and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked less like a billionaire CEO and more like someone's grandfather, except for the unmistakable air of authority that seemed to surround him regardless of his attire. "Please call me Walter," he said, gesturing to the stool beside him, "especially since we'll be working together." Sarah sat, feeling oddly formal in her blue blouse and black pants. "Then you should call me Sarah." He nodded, turning back to the folder. "Sarah, I wanted to discuss a few things with you before Monday's reopening." He passed her a sheet of paper, the new menu, professionally designed but still simple, retaining the classic diner feel. Sarah scanned it, pleased to see that many of her suggestions from yesterday had already been incorporated. "This looks good. You kept all the classics," of course, Walter said. "A place like this, the regulars would revolt if we took away their favorites. But I did add a few healthier options and expanded the breakfast selection." Sarah nodded, genuinely impressed by the thoughtfulness of the menu design. It honored Harlow's traditions while gently nudging the diner into the present. "I also wanted to discuss your authority," Walter continued, his tone turning more serious. "As manager, you'll have complete operational control. Staffing, scheduling, daily decisions, all that falls to you. I won't be micromanaged." Sarah looked up from the menu, surprised. "You're giving me that much autonomy? You hardly know me." Walter's pale blue eyes studied her face. I know enough. You care about this place and the people in it. That's what matters. Close the folder. I've spent 50 years in business. Sarah, I've learned to trust my instincts about people. And your instincts told you to hire a waitress with no management experience to run your new acquisition. She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Walter smiled slightly. My instincts told me to hire someone who gave a meal to a stranger without expectation of return. That kind of character is worth more than a decade of management experience. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. Put that way, it sounded noble. But the reality had been simpler. She hadn't been able to bear the thought of an elderly man going hungry when there was perfectly good food available. There is one other matter, Walter said, reaching for another folder. Something I didn't mention in our initial meeting. Sarah tensed, waiting for the catch, the condition that would reveal this was all too good to be true after all. I've established a scholarship fund, Walter said, sliding the folder toward her, for Riverdale residents who want to pursue higher education but lack the financial means. The first recipient will be announced next week. He tapped the folder. I'd like that recipient to be your sister. Sarah stared at him, speechless. Inside the folder was a formal letter offering Lisa Bennett a full scholarship to complete her nursing degree at Riverdale Community College, with an additional stipend for living expenses. How did you know? She finally managed. About Lisa's nursing ambitions. Your background check mentioned she was studying nursing before her diagnosis, Walter said simply. And you mentioned once wanting to be a nurse yourself in a conversation with a customer last year. The diner has regulars who remember these things. Sarah's mind reeled. Walter Harrington had been more thorough in his research than she'd imagined. This is ... Incredibly generous, she said, her voice catching. But why? Why do all this for us? For Harlow's? Walter was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the window, to the town beyond. When I was a boy, he began, his voice distant with memory. My mother worked 2 jobs to support us after my father left. One of those jobs was waiting tables at Harlow's. George Harlow, the original owner, he used to let her bring me in during her shifts. I'd sit at the counter doing my homework, and he'd slip me free slices of pie. He turned back to Sarah. He was kind when he didn't have to be. That kind of thing stays with you. He tapped his fingers on the counter, a thoughtful gesture. I left Riverdale as soon as I could, convinced there was nothing for me here. Built my company, made my fortune, rarely looked back, but now in my later years I find myself thinking about the places and people that shaped me. Sarah understood then. This wasn't just about restoring a diner or performing a random act of charity. It was about legacy, about honoring the past while building something for the future. So this is personal for you, she said softly. Walter nodded. Most worthwhile things are. He stood, gathering his folders. Monday morning, 8 a.m., the staff meeting. I'll be there to introduce you officially, and then I'll step back. Harlow's will be your show to run. As he moved toward the door, Sarah found her voice again. Walter, he paused, turning back. Thank you. Not just for the job or Lisa's scholarship. For giving Harlow's a second chance. A smile touched his lips, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Everyone deserves a second chance, Sarah. Even old diners and stubborn billionaires. He opened the door, the bell jingling softly. See you Monday. After he left, Sarah remained at the counter, looking around at the renewed diner. In just 2 days, it had transformed from a dying business into a place of possibility. Just as her life had transformed from desperate struggle to unexpected opportunity. She took out her phone and texted Lisa. Asterisk coming home with big news. Really big ... asterisk. Then she slipped off the stool and walked through the diner, familiarizing herself with its new layout, its restored glory. On Monday, this would be her responsibility, her domain to nurture and grow. For the first time in years, the future seemed not just bearable but bright, and all because she'd followed her instinct to feed a hungry old man. Monday morning arrived with a persistent drizzle, the kind of soft summer rain that seemed fitting for new beginning. Sarah woke before her alarm, a mixture of excitement and anxiety churning in her stomach. Today, she would walk into Harlow's not as a waitress, but as its manager. The thought still felt surreal, like something from someone else's life that she had accidentally stepped into. Lisa insisted on making breakfast, a rare occurrence given her limited energy. Your first day as boss lady deserves something better than cereal, she'd declared, standing at the stove in her pajamas and robe. The scholarship letter sat on the kitchen table between them as they ate, its official letterhead and formal language a tangible promise of change. Lisa had cried when Sarah showed it to her on Saturday, then laughed through her tears, then cried again. I still can't believe it, Lisa said now, poking at her scrambled eggs. Any of it. It's like some fairy godfather just appeared and fixed everything. Sarah smiled, though she shared her sister's disbelief. Not everything. You still have to do the actual studying part. I can handle that, Lisa said, her eyes bright with determination. The doctors say the new treatment should help with the fatigue. Once I start feeling better, I'll be unstoppable. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed her sister's hand. You already are. She left the house at 7:30, umbrella in hand, dressed in her best black pants and a crisp white blouse she'd ironed the night before. The walk to Harlow's felt different today. Purposeful, significant. She was no longer trudging to a job she needed but didn't love. She was striding toward a responsibility she had chosen to accept. The diner's lights were already on when she arrived, the gleaming interior visible through the rain-streaked windows. A small group of people stood inside the staff, gathered for the meeting Walter had mentioned. Sarah took a deep breath, folded her umbrella, and pushed open the door. The conversation paused as all eyes turned toward her. Manny was there, his broad face creased in a rare smile. Donna, her fellow waitress, looked uncertain but curious. The busboy, Jake, a community college student who worked weekends, leaned against the counter with his typical casual posture. And two new faces, a young woman and an older man Sarah didn't recognize. At the center of the group stood Walter Harrington, looking surprisingly at home in the diner setting despite his obvious wealth and status. He smiled when he saw Sarah, gesturing her forward. "Ah, here she is," he said, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to being listened. "Everyone, as most of you already know, this is Sarah Bennett. She's been the heart and soul of Harlow's for the past 6 years, and now she'll be its manager." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks as all eyes remained fixed on her. She'd never been comfortable being the center of attention, but she forced herself to stand tall to meet their gazes with confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Thank you for the introduction, Walter," she said, her voice steadier than expected. "It's good to see familiar faces and to meet new ones." Walter nodded approvingly, then continued, "I'll keep this brief. As you can see, we've made some significant improvements to Harlow's over new equipment, updated decor, expanded menu. But what makes a diner special isn't its equipment or its paint job, it's its people." He looked around the group, making eye contact with each person. "That's why I insisted that all current staff be retained, and why I've chosen Sarah to lead this new chapter. She understands what Harlow's means to this community because she's part of it." With that, Walter gestured to the two unfamiliar faces. "I've added 2 new staff members to help with the expanded hours. This is Miguel Rodriguez, our new evening cook, and Emma Chun, who will be handling the afternoon waitressing shift." The new hires nodded in greeting. Miguel was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and the calm demeanor of an experienced chef. Emma looked to be in her early 20s with a bright smile and alert eyes. "Now," Walter concluded, "I'll turn the meeting over to Sarah. As I mentioned when we spoke individually, I won't be involved in day-to-day operations. Harlow's is in Sarah's capable hands now." He stepped back, literally and figuratively ceding the floor to her. Sarah hadn't prepared a speech. She hadn't expected to need one, but looking at the expectant faces before her, she knew she needed to say something meaningful, something that would set the tone for this new beginning. "First," she began, "I want to thank each of you for staying with Harlow's through this transition. Change can be unsettling, but I believe the changes we're making are all for the better." She glanced at Walter, who nodded encouragingly. "Harlow's has always been more than just a place to eat," Sarah continued, finding her rhythm. "It's where people celebrate birthdays and anniversaries. It's where they come for comfort after funerals, where high school students get their first jobs, and where the morning regulars debate local politics over coffee." She saw recognition in her colleagues' eyes. They knew these truths as well as she did. "Our job isn't just to serve food. It's to serve this community, to be a constant in people's lives." That hasn't changed, and it won't change. What will change is how we do it with better equipment, more options for our customer, and the support we need to do our jobs well. Sarah took a breath, thinking of Richard's penny-pinching ways, his constant criticism, his refusal to invest in either the diner or its people. No more cutting corners. No more running out of supplies because someone was trying to save a few dollars. No more ignoring equipment that needs repair. Manny let out a low whistle of appreciation, and Donna smiled for the first time since Sarah had arrived. "I've been where you are," Sarah said, addressing her fellow staff members directly. "I know what it's like to be on the front lines, dealing with customers, working with what we had. That experience is going to inform every decision I make as manager." She turned to Miguel and Emma. "And to our new team members, welcome. We have decades of combined experience in this. Don't hesitate to ask questions or make suggestions. We're building something special here, and everyone's input matters." With that, Sarah transitioned to the practical matters, the new schedule, the updated menu, the reopening at 11 a.m. for lunch service. As she spoke, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Walter watched from the sidelines, his expression unreadable but his eyes attentive. When the meeting concluded and the staff dispersed to prepare for opening, he approached her. "You're a natural leader," he said quietly. That was exactly the right message. Sarah shook her head, still unused to praise. "I just said what I was thinking. That's precisely why it worked." Walter gestured around the diner. "This place has good bones, but it needed a soul. You're giving it that." Before Sarah could respond, the front door opened and Richard Jenkins walked in. He stopped short at the sight of Walter and Sarah standing together, his face contorting in a mixture of shock and anger. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, looking around at the renovated diner. "I was told there was a transition meeting I needed to attend." Walter stepped forward, his posture straightening almost imperceptibly. "Miss Jenkins, thank you for coming. I'm Walter Harrington, the new owner of Harlow's Diner." Richard's eyes narrowed. "You? You're the one who bought me out?" He jabbed a finger towards Sarah. "And you made her the manager?" "The same waitress I fired 3 days ago." "Yes," Walter replied calm. "Ms. Bennett is now managing this establishment, and doing an excellent job of it already." Richard let out a harsh laugh. "This is ridiculous. She's a waitress. She has no management experience, no business training. She has something far more valuable." Walter interrupted, his voice hardening slightly. "Integrity, compassion, a genuine connection to this community and its people." Richard's face flushed an ugly red. "This is about that free meal, isn't it? It's what this whole thing is about." You're the old man she fed on my dime. Your dime? Walter raised an eyebrow. As I recall, Miss Bennett was fired for that act of kindness, so technically it was on her dime, not yours. Sarah stepped forward, unwilling to let Walter fight her battles. Richard, why are you here? The sale is final. You've been paid. Richard's angry gaze shifted to her. I was told to come for a meeting. I didn't know it was to watch you play manager in my diner. It's not your diner anymore, Sarah said firmly, and we open in 2 hours. So unless you're here as a customer, I'll have to ask you to leave. For a moment, Richard looked like he might argue further, but something in Sarah's steady gaze, the quiet authority she now possessed, seemed to register with him. With a final glare at Walter, he turned and stormed out, letting the door slam behind him. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well, that was unpleasant. Walter nodded, a hint of amusement in his eyes, but necessary. Closing chapters properly matters. He checked his watch. I should leave you to your preparations. Remember, this is your show now. Single quotes as Walter headed for the door. Sarah called after him. Will you be here for the reopening? He paused, considering. No, I don't think so. This moment belongs to you and your team. He smiled, the expression softening his features, but I might stop by later in the week as a customer. After he left, Sarah stood alone in the center of the diner, taking in the gleaming surfaces, the fresh paint, the new menus stacked by the register. In just a few hours, these booths would be filled with customers, some familiar faces, some new ones drawn by word of the renovation. It was her responsibility now to make sure they all felt welcome, that the food was good, that Harlow's lived up to its potential as the heart of the community. The task was daunting, but for the first time in years, Sarah felt equal to a challenge. She rolled up her sleeves and headed for the kitchen. There was work to be done. The hours before opening flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah moved between the kitchen and the dining area, checking and double-checking that everything was ready. Manny familiarized himself with the new grill, his initial skepticism gradually transforming into appreciation as he tested its capabilities. Donna arranged the new table settings, periodically glancing at Sarah with an expression that mixed uncertainty and respect. It's strange, isn't it? Donna said as they folded napkins together. Friday you were taking orders alongside me, and today you're the boss. Sarah placed a stack of menus by the register. Trust me, it's just as strange from this side, but nothing really changes between us, Donna. We're still a team. Donna nodded, though Sarah could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. There would be an adjustment period for everyone, herself included. Roles and relationships that had been clearly defined for years were now shifting, and it would take time for the new normal to establish itself. At 10:45, Sarah gathered everyone by the front door for a final pep talk. All right, team, in 15 minutes. We open these doors and start a new chapter for Harlow's. There might be some bumps along the way, new menu, new procedures. When those bumps happen, don't panic. We'll work through them together. She looked at each staff member in turn, making sure they felt seen and valued. Questions before we unlock? Jake raised his hand. Are we still allowed to eat the mistakes? The question broke the tension, eliciting laughs from the group. Yes, Jake, you can still eat the mistakes, Sarah confirmed, smiling. Though with the new grill, Manny might make fewer of them. Manny snorted. Don't bet on it. New equipment means new ways to mess up. As the laughter subsided, Sarah felt a surge of pride in her team. They were ready. She was ready. Let's do this, she said, moving to unlock the front door precisely at 11 a.m. They didn't have to wait long for their first customers. Word had spread through Riverdale about the diner's renovation and reopening. By 11:15, half the booths were filled, and a steady stream of curious townspeople continued to arrive. Mayor Thompson and his wife claimed the corner booth, their usual spot. The high school principal and the town librarian sat at the counter, already deep in conversation about the school's budget cuts. Mrs. Petrovich from down the street brought her knitting circle, taking up the largest table by the window. Place looks good, Sarah, Mayor Thompson called as she passed by with a pot of coffee. Heard you're running the show now, To single quote, Sarah paused to top off his cup. News travels fast in Riverdale. Small towns, he replied with a wink. No secrets here, but for what it's worth, you were always the heart of this place. The title just makes it official. The compliment warmed her, but Sarah didn't have time to dwell on it. The lunch rush was rapidly intensifying. She moved between tables, helping Donna and Emma keep up with orders, jumping behind the counter when the line at the register grew too long, even bussing tables when Jake couldn't keep pace. It was exhausting but exhilarating work, unlike her days as a waitress, when she'd performed similar tasks out of necessity and with the cloud of financial anxiety always hanging over her. Today she moved with purpose and authority. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was her diner to nurture and grow. The first real test came at 12:30, when the ancient ice maker, the one piece of equipment that hadn't been replaced during the renovation, suddenly gave out with a worrying grinding sound. Perfect timing, Manny muttered, wiping his brow as he emerged from the kitchen. Middle of lunch rush, and we've got no ice, Sarah thought quickly. Jake, run to the convenience store on the corner. Buy all the bags of ice they have. Emma, call the equipment supplier from Walter's list. Tell them we need an ice maker installed today, not tomorrow. Donna, let customers know we're temporarily out of iced drinks. Her team sprang into action without question. Crisis handled efficiently and with minimal disruption. When Jake returned with the ice, Sarah helped him distribute it to the drink station, earning a grateful nod from Donna, who was juggling a 6-top order. You're doing great, Sarah told her, recognizing the flustered look she'd often worn herself during especially busy shifts. Jessa, breathe. We've got this. By 2 p.m., the lunch rush had subsided to a steady trickle of late diners and coffee drinkers. Sarah finally had a moment to retreat to the small office at the back of the diner, her office now in sit-down. Her feet ached in a familiar way, but the satisfaction she felt was entirely new. A knock at the office door interrupted her moment of respite. Emma stood there looking slightly nervous. "Sarah, there's someone asking for you, a man in a wheelchair. Says he's your first official complaint." Sarah frowned, rising immediately. Complaints on opening day weren't unexpected, but they were certainly unwelcome. She followed Emma back to the dining area where a middle-aged man in a wheelchair waited by the counter. His stern expression melted into a smile as she approached. "Dr. Abernathy?" Sarah recognized him from Lisa's visits to the medical center. "Ms. Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "I hope you don't mind my dropping by. I wanted to see the place Mr. Harrington has been talking about." Sarah shook his hand, momentarily confused. "You know Walter? For many years. I run the Harrington Medical Center's lupus research program. Single quotes. He glanced around approvingly. "Nice place you've got here. And I was joking about the complaint. The food is excellent." Understanding dawned on Sarah. This was the doctor Walter had mentioned for Lisa's treatment program. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Abernathy, and thank you for accepting Lisa into your program." He waved away her thanks. "Walter speaks very highly of you both, and the program is always looking for suitable candidates." He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. "Have your sister call my office to schedule her initial consultation. The sooner we get her started, the better." After Dr. Abernathy left, Sarah stood by the counter, turning his card over in her hands. Another piece of Walter's generosity falling into place. The scholarship for Lisa's education, the treatment program for her health, the job that would allow Sarah to support them both while her sister pursued her dreams. It was almost too much to process. "Everything okay, boss?" Manny asked, his head poking out from the kitchen. Sarah tucked the card into her pocket. "Everything's fine, Manny. Better than fine, actually." The afternoon shifted into early evening, the diner's rhythm changing with the clientele. The after-school crowd arrived at 3:30, just as Sarah had predicted, filling the booths with teenagers ordering fries and milkshake. Miguel arrived for his shift, bringing a calm, professional energy to the kitchen as Manny prepared to leave. Sarah watched the transition with satisfaction. The new schedule meant shorter shifts for everyone, reducing burnout and improving morale. It was a simple change that Richard had resisted for years, insisting that longer shifts were more efficient. At 6 p.m., Sarah realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast. She sat at the counter, going over the day's receipts while Emma brought her a plate of Manny's famous meatloaf, the very dish she'd given to Walter on that fateful day. "First day report," Donna said, sliding onto the stool next to her. "Lunch service was 30% busier than our best day under Richard. No major disasters unless you count the ice maker. And the new menu is a hit, especially the gluten-free options." Sarah smiled, both at the good news and at Donna's easy adoption of the manager's role in reporting to her. "How are you feeling about everything?" she asked, genuinely interested in her colleague's perspective. Donna considered the question, twisting a strand of her blonde hair around her finger. "It's different. Good different, mostly. The new equipment makes everything easier. The customers seem happier." She hesitated. "And it's nice not to have Richard breathing down our necks, counting every packet of sugar." "That's for sure," Sarah agreed, remembering his penny-pinching way. "But mostly," Donna continued, her voice softening, "it's nice to see you in charge. You deserve this, Sarah. You've carried this place on your back for years." The unexpected validation brought a lump to Sarah's throat. "Thanks, Donna. That means a lot." As the dinner service wound down, Sarah made rounds through the diner, checking in with customers, many of whom she knew by name. The O'Malley family was there, the children's faces brightening when they saw her. "Sarah," 8-year-old Lily called, waving enthusiastically. "Dad got his job back at the mill, and the food is so much better now." Sarah smiled, ruffling the girl's hair as Murray. O'Malley looked on with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. "That's wonderful news, Lily. About your dad's job, I mean. The food was always good, now it's just made with better equipment. And love," Lily declared with a child's certainty. "Mom says you can taste when food is made with love." Sarah glanced at Mrs. O'Malley, who nodded with a knowing smile. "Your mom is absolutely right." As the last customers trickled out and the staff began the closing routine, Sarah stood by the window, watching the rain-washed street outside. The diner's warm lights reflected on the wet pavement, creating a golden glow that seemed to reach out into the night. She thought about Walter Harrington, about the unexpected chain of events that had led to this moment. A simple act of kindness, a free meal for an old man who looked hungry, had somehow unlocked a door she hadn't even known existed. But perhaps that was how life works sometimes. Small gestures, made without expectation of return, creating ripples that eventually came back as waves of change. 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The renovated Harlow's quickly became the talk of Riverdale, drawing both longtime regulars and curious newcomers. Word spread about the improved food, the expanded menu, and most importantly, the warm, welcoming atmosphere that Sarah and her team worked hard to maintain. The diner's financial performance exceeded even Walter's optimistic projections. Sarah pored over the numbers each evening, still marveling at the difference proper equipment and adequate staffing made. Under Richard's leadership, they'd been lucky to break even most months. Now they were showing a healthy profit while still maintaining quality and treating staff well. but more satisfying than the financial success were the intangible change. The diner hummed with a renewed energy, a sense of community that had been slowly fading under Richard's regime. Regular customers lingered longer, newcomers returned, and the staff worked with a spirited camaraderie that made even the busiest rushes manageable. Sarah had settled into her role with surprising ease. The transition from waitress to manager, which had initially seemed so daunting, now felt natural. She still jumped in to help during busy periods, refilling coffee, running food, or bussing tables, but she'd also embraced the strategic aspects of management, scheduling, inventory, marketing, and staff development. At home, changes were equally dramatic. Lisa had begun her treatments at the Harrington Medical Center under Dr. Abernathy's direct care. The difference was already noticeable: more energy, less pain, a brightness in her eyes that had been absent for too long. She'd also enrolled in nursing classes at Riverdale Community College, her long-deferred dream finally within reach. "You look happy," Lisa commented one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "Really happy, not just putting in a brave face. Happy." Sarah smiled, realizing it was true. The constant anxiety that had been her companion for years, the grinding worry about money, about Lisa's health, about their precarious future, had receded to a manageable murmur rather than a deafening roar. "I am happy," she admitted. "It's strange. I almost feel guilty about it, like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." Lisa nudged her sister's shoulder. "Stop that. You deserve this. We both do." She looked out at the yard, where Sarah had recently found time to tend to their mother's neglected flower beds. "But I do wonder about Walter. He hasn't been by the diner yet, has he?" Sarah shook her head. "No. Margaret calls every few days to check in. But Walter himself has kept his distance." She'd been wondering about his absence herself. "I think he meant what he said about not micromanaging. He's letting me run things my way. Or maybe he's just been busy," Lisa suggested. "Billionaires probably have packed schedules." "Probably," Sarah agreed, though she couldn't help feeling that there was more to Walter's absence than mere busyness. He had spoken of Harlow's with such personal connection, had gone to such lengths to restore it. It seemed odd that he wouldn't want to see the results of his investment. The next morning brought a partial answer. Sarah arrived at the diner early, as was her habit, to review the previous day's receipts and prepare for the breakfast rush. She was surprised to find Margaret Winters waiting outside, elegant as always in a tailored suit despite the early hour. Sarah greeted her, unlocking the door. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," Margaret assured her, following Sarah inside. "Walter asked me to deliver some news personally rather than over the phone." Sarah felt a flutter of apprehension as they sat at the counter. "What kind of news?" Margaret's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Walter's been in the hospital for the past 10 days. Nothing to be alarmed about," she added quickly, seeing Sarah's expression. "A scheduled procedure that was long overdue. He's recovering well and should be released tomorrow." "Why didn't he say anything?" Sarah asked, concerned both by the news and by Walter's silence about it. "That's Walter," Margaret said with a slight smile. "He doesn't like to make a fuss, but he did ask me to extend an invitation. He wondered if you might visit him this afternoon. He's at Riverdale Memorial, the private wing." Sarah immediately nodded. "Of course. What time would be best?" 3 o'clock would work well. I'll let the nurses know to expect you." Margaret stood, straightening her already immaculate jacket. "He'll be pleased. He's been asking for daily updates on Harlow's progress." Single quotes after Margaret left. Sarah went through her morning routine mechanically, her mind preoccupied with thoughts of Walter. It made sense now why he hadn't visited the diner, but why hadn't he mentioned his upcoming procedure? Did he think she wouldn't care? Or was he simply that private a person, unwilling to share personal matters with someone he still considered an employee? The morning passed in a haze of coffee refills and breakfast orders. Sarah managed to keep her concerns about Walter from affecting her work, but by early afternoon she found herself watching the clock, eager for her meeting with him. At 2:30 she left Donna in charge and walked the 6 blocks to Riverdale Memorial Hospital. Unlike the crowded, somewhat chaotic public wing where Lisa had received her initial treatment, the private wing was hushed and elegant, more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. A discreet reception desk was staffed by a professionally smiling nurse who directed Sarah to room 217 after checking her name against an approved visitor list. Sarah paused outside Walter's door, suddenly nervous. She had only met the man a handful of times, yet he had transformed her life so completely that she felt an odd mixture of gratitude, obligation, and genuine concern for his well-being. She knocked softly. "Come in," Walter's voice called, sounding stronger than she had expected. Walter sat in a comfortable chair by the window, a book open on his lap. He wore a burgundy dressing gown over hospital pajamas, and though his complexion was paler than usual, his eyes were as alert and perceptive as ever. "Sarah," he said warmly, closing his book, "thank you for coming. Please sit down." He gestured to the chair opposite his. Sarah sat, taking in the private room with its tasteful furnishings, fresh flowers, and view of the hospital gardens. "Margaret told me you had a procedure. Are you all right?" Walter waved a dismissive hand. "I'm fine." Just some minor heart surgery that I've been putting off for too long. The doctors have been nagging me for years. His tone was light, but Sarah noticed the way his hand briefly touched his chest, a subtle tell that the procedure might have been more serious than he was letting on. You should have said something, Sarah said gently. We've been wondering why you haven't visited the diner. Walter's expression soft. I didn't want to worry anyone, and I didn't want to distract you from the important work of getting Harlow's back on its feet. He leaned forward slightly, which, by all accounts, you've done admirably. Margaret tells me business has nearly doubled since reopening. The community has been incredibly supportive, Sarah acknowledged. People are genuinely happy to see Harlow's thriving again. And Lisa, how is she responding to Dr. Abernathy's treatment program? The genuine concern in Walter's voice touched Sarah. She's doing well, better than we expected, actually. She has more good days than bad now, and she's already completed her first 2 classes at the community college. Walter smiled, satisfaction evident in his expression. Excellent. Abernathy is the best in his field. If anyone can get Lisa's condition under control, it's him. There was a brief, comfortable silence between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the hospital outside. Sarah studied Walter's face, noting the lines of age and experience etched there, but also the keen intelligence in his eyes, the same intelligence that had built a business empire from nothing. Why did you do it? She asked finally, the question that had been burning in her mind since that first meeting in his office. All of this, buying Harlow's, hiring me, the scholarship for Lisa, the medical treatment, it's so much, and all because I gave you a meal? Walter considered her question, his fingers absently tracing the spine of his book. The meal was a catalyst, not a cause, he said slowly. It showed me something I needed to see. What do you mean? In my world, the world of corporate acquisitions, high finance, billion-dollar deals, genuine kindness is rare, Walter explained. People do things for advantage, for gain, for status. What you did, giving a meal to a stranger who appeared to need it, without expectation of return or recognition, that kind of authentic compassion is precious precisely because it's so uncommon. He looked out the window, his gaze distant. I've spent my life building things, making money, expanding my influence, but in recent years I've found myself asking what it all means. What's the point of wealth if it doesn't create something of value beyond itself? Sarah listened intently, beginning to understand the man behind the fortune. When I was diagnosed with this heart condition, Walter continued, the doctors made it clear that at my age, time is no longer a luxury I can take for granted. It forced me to think about legacy in a different way, not buildings with my name on them or a larger number on a balance sheet, but actual impact on real people's lives. He turned back to Sarah, his expression earnest. Harlow's was important to me as a boy. It represented kindness and community when I needed both. Seeing you extend that same kindness in that same place all these years later, it felt like closing a circle, like the opportunity to pay forward what George Harlow and my mother once gave me. The explanation was both simpler and more profound than Sarah had imagined. Not charity or whim or some elaborate game, but a genuine desire to create positive change, to leave the world a little better than he'd found it. I understand, she said quietly, and I'm grateful not just for myself and Lisa, but for what you've done for Harlow's, for the whole. Walter nodded, seemingly satisfied that she grasped his motivations. Now, he said, his tone brightening, tell me everything about the diner. Margaret gives me the numbers, but I want to hear about the people, the daily life of the place. How's Manny adjusting to the new kitchen? Is Jake still eating all the mistakes? Has Richard shown his face again? Sarah spent nearly 2 hours with Walter, sharing stories about the diner and its colorful cast of regulars. She told him about the group of retired teachers who came in every Tuesday morning and debated politics over endless cups of coffee, about the young couple who had their first date at Harlow's and now brought their newborn son in every Sunday after church, about Jake dropping an entire tray of milkshakes during the Friday night rush and how even the customers had pitched in to help clean up the mess. Walter listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions or laughing at the humorous anecdotes. Sarah found herself forgetting that he was a billionaire, that he owned not just Harlow's but hundreds of other businesses across the country. In this hospital room, he was simply Walter, a man who cared about a small-town diner and the community it served. Richard hasn't shown his face since that first day, Sarah said in response to Walter's earlier question, but I heard he's been telling anyone who'll listen that you only bought Harlow's as some kind of charity case for me. Walter snorted, clearly amused. And how does he explain the diner's sudden profitability? Your management magic? Oh, he has an explanation for that too, Sarah replied with a wry smile. Apparently I've lowered standards and am cutting corners to boost numbers. The irony is almost poetic, Walter observed, shaking his head. The man who ran that place into the ground through his own corner cutting, accusing you of the same. A nurse appeared at the door, politely informing them that Walter needed his medication and rest. Sarah rose to leave, surprised by how quickly the time had passed. I've taken up too much of your recovery time, she said, gathering her purse. I should let you rest. Nonsense, Walter replied. This has been the most enjoyable afternoon I've had in weeks. Hospital days tend to blend together in a monotony of medications and blood pressure checks. Sarah hesitated, then asked, when will you be released? Tomorrow, if all goes well, Walter said, though I'm under strict orders to take it easy for at least another week. An idea formed in Sarah's mind. Would you like to come to dinner? At our house. Nothing fancy, but Lisa would love to thank you in person for everything you've done. Walter looked genuinely touched by the invitation. I'd be honored, though I'm not sure your sister has anything to thank me for. The scholarship and treatment program, she earned those through her own merit and determination. Still, Sarah persisted. It would mean a lot to us both. Then I accept, Walter said with a smile. Just let me know when. As Sarah left the hospital, she felt a strange lightness in her chest. Her relationship with Walter had shifted again from employee and benefactor to something approaching friendship. It was an unexpected development, but a welcome one. The next few days passed in their now familiar rhythm of busy diner shifts and quiet evenings at home. Lisa's energy continued to improve with her treatments, and she threw herself into preparations for Walter's visit with characteristic enthusiasm. It's not every day we have a billionaire for dinner, she teased, poring over recipe books spread across the kitchen table. We should at least try to impress him a little, Sarah laughed, chopping vegetables for a salad. I'm pretty sure Walter's beyond being impressed by home cooking. The man probably has personal chefs who trained in Paris. That's not the point, Lisa countered, about showing gratitude. And anyway, Mom's lasagna recipe has been known to bring grown men to tears. The night of the dinner arrived, a pleasant Friday evening in early summer. Walter had insisted on driving himself, declining Sarah's offer to pick him up. At precisely 7 o'clock, modest sedan, not the luxury car Sarah had expected, pulled up in front of their small house. Lisa, who had been watching from the window, raised an eyebrow. That's Walter Harrington? In a Toyota? What were you expecting? A limousine? Sarah asked, smoothing down her dress. A simple blue one she'd bought for the occasion. Her first new clothing purchase in over a year. Kind of, yeah, Lisa admitted. Walter approached their front door with a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. He moved more slowly than when Sarah had first met him at the diner, a subtle reminder of his recent surgery. But his smile was warm as Sarah opened the door to greet him. Welcome to our home, she said, accepting the flowers, a beautiful arrangement of lilies and irises. Please come in. Walter stepped inside, taking in the modest but tidy living room with its worn furniture and family photos. Thank you for inviting me, he said, then turned to Lisa, who stood near the kitchen doorway. And you must be Lisa. I've heard a great deal about you. All good, I hope, Lisa replied with a smile, stepping forward to shake his hand. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Harrington. What you've done for us, for me, I don't even know how to begin to thank you. Walter, please, he corrected gently. And no thanks are necessary. From what Sarah tells me, you're making excellent progress both in your treatments and your studies. That's all the thanks I need. He handed Lisa the gift bag, a small housewarming gift. Inside was a beautifully bound leather journal with Lisa's name embossed on the cover. For your nursing studies, Walter explained. I've always found that writing things down helps me remember them better. The thoughtfulness of the gift clearly touched Lisa. It's beautiful. Thank you. Dinner was a relaxed affair, the initial awkwardness quickly giving way to easy conversation. Walter proved to be an engaging guest, asking Lisa about her nursing program and sharing stories from his own college days at Stanford. He complimented Sarah's lasagna with genuine appreciation, even asking for the recipe. My late wife Eleanor loved to cook, he explained, accepting a second helping. But Italian food was never her forte. She was more of a French cuisine enthusiast. You haven't remarried? Lisa asked, then immediately looked embarrassed by her directness. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. Walter shook his head, indicating the question hadn't offended him. No, I never did. Eleanor and I were together for 40 years. After she died, it didn't seem necessary to look for another companion. My work filled the void, for better or worse. There was a wistfulness in his voice that made Sarah wonder if he regretted that choice now, in his later years. But before she could follow that thought, Walter changed the subject, asking about the house and how long they'd lived there. It was our parents' home, Sarah explained. Dad bought it when they first married, and when Mom moved to Florida after he died, she left it to us. It's a good house, Walter observed, looking around the dining room with its faded wallpaper and simple furnishing. Solid bones. You can tell a lot about a place by its feel. After dinner, they moved to the porch, where Walter accepted a cup of coffee but declined Lisa's offer of dessert. Doctor's orders, he said with a rueful smile. Apparently heart surgery and triple chocolate cake don't mix. As the evening wore on, Walter seemed to relax more fully, the formal businessman giving way to a more contemplative soul. He asked about their parents, their childhood in Riverdale, their dreams for the future, and he really listened to their answers with a genuine interest that few people had ever shown in the Bennett sisters' lives. When Lisa excused herself to take her evening medication, leaving Sarah and Walter alone on the porch, a comfortable silence fell between them. The fireflies had emerged, dotting the yard with their intermittent glow. Thank you for this evening, Walter said finally. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed a home-cooked meal in good company like this. We're the ones who should be thanking you, Sarah replied. For everything. Single quotes. Walter waved away her gratitude. You know, when I was in the hospital, I had a lot of time to think about my life, the choices I've made, the legacy I'll leave behind. He gazed out at the darkening yard. I've built a successful business, accumulated more wealth than I could spend in several lifetimes. But sitting there, hooked up to machines, I realized how little that matters in the end. Sarah listened, sensing he needed to share these thoughts. What matters, Walter continued, are the connections we make, the lives we touch, the differences, however small, that we make in our communities. He turned to her, his expression earnest. What you've done with Harlow's in just a few weeks, Sarah, that matters. The way you've restored it as a gathering place, a heart for Riverdale. That's a real legacy. I couldn't have done it without your investments, Sarah pointed out. Money is just a tool, Walter countered. It's how it's used that counts. And in your hands, it's being used to create something valuable, something lasting. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up in front of the house. A moment later, a familiar figure emerged. Drickard Jenkins, his movements unsteady, his face flushed with what appeared to be alcohol and anger. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he called, his voice carrying in the quiet evening air. The billionaire in his charity case playing house. Sarah stood, her pleasant evening shattered by Richard's unwelcome appearance. "Richard, you need to leave. You're drunk." "Not drunk enough," he retorted, stumbling toward the porch steps. "Not nearly drunk enough to forget how you two humiliated me. Took my business, my reputation." Walter had risen as well, his posture straight despite his recent surgery. Jenkins, this is neither the time nor the place for this conversation. I suggest you go home and sober up." Richard's face contorted with rage. "Don't tell me what to do, old man. You think you can just waltz into town and buy whatever you want? Play the big hero? Well, I've got news for you." His tirade was cut short as Lisa appeared at the door, her expression a mixture of concern and anger. "Is everything okay out here?" Richard's bloodshot eyes fixed on Lisa, his anger momentarily derailed by her appearance. "Well, if it isn't the sister, got yourself a nice scholarship, didn't you? More charity from the billionaire." "That's enough, Richard," Sarah said firmly, moving to stand between him and the porch steps. "You need to leave now." Walter stepped up beside Sarah, his presence calm but commanding despite his recent surgery. "Mr. Jenkins, I understand you're upset about losing the diner, but harassing Sarah and her sister in their home crosses a line." Richard laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "A line? You want to talk about lines? You swooped in and took everything from me. Do you have any idea what that diner meant to me?" "I do," Walter replied evenly, "which makes its condition under your management all the more disappointing. You weren't a caretaker, Mr. Jenkins. You were a parasite, draining it of life until it was barely functioning." Richard's face darkened with rage. He took a stumbling step forward, but before he could climb the porch steps, a police cruiser pulled up behind his car, its lights flashing but sirens silent. Officer Martinez, a Harlow's regular who always ordered the same breakfast, 2 eggs over easy with extra crispy hash browns, stepped out. "Everything all right here?" he called, approaching with a practiced casualness that didn't quite mask his vigilance. "Officer Martinez," Sarah greeted him, relief evident in her voice. Richard was just leaving. Richard glared at the officer, then at Walter and Sarah. For a moment, seemed he might escalate the situation further, but something in Martinez's steady gaze must have penetrated his alcohol-fueled bravado. "This isn't over," he muttered, backing away. "You can't just come in and change everything. This town has rules, traditions." "Yes, it does," Walter agreed. "And one of those traditions is Harlow's Diner serving good food with genuine care, a tradition Sarah has restored." Richard had no response to that. With a final venomous look, he stumbled back to his car. "I'll make sure he gets home safely," Officer Martinez said, nodding to Sarah and Walter. "Sorry about the interruption to your evening." After they'd gone, Lisa let out a long breath. "Well, that was dramatic." Walter chuckled, the tension breaking. Small towns, always more exciting than they appear on the surface. They returned to their seats on the porch, the peaceful mood of earlier, somewhat diminished but not destroyed. Lisa brought out the dessert Walter had declined, a fresh berry crumble and 3 spoons. "I think we've earned this," she said, placing it between them. "Doctor's orders be damned." Walter smiled, taking one of the spoons. "I won't tell if you won't," as they shared the dessert. Watching the last of the day's light fade from the sky, Sarah found herself reflecting on the strange, twisted path that had led them here. From being fired for an act of kindness to sitting on her porch eating dessert with the billionaire who had changed her life. It was the kind of story no one would believe if she told it. "I've been thinking," Walter said, setting his spoon down, "about the future of Harlow's." Sarah tensed slightly, wondering if this was the moment when the other shoe would finally drop. "Oh, it's doing remarkably well under your management," Walter continued. "Better than I anticipated, honestly, which makes what I'm about to propose either very smart or very foolish, depending on your perspective." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document, which he handed to Sarah. "This is for you." And Lisa indirectly single quote. Sarah unfolded the papers, scanning the legal language with growing disbelief. "Walter, this is ownership transfer papers." "For Harlow's," Lisa gasped, leaning over to look at the document. "You're giving Sarah the diner?" Walter nodded, his expression serious but his eyes warm. "Not giving, selling, for exactly $1, which I believe is technically owed to me from that free meal." His lips quirked in a small smile. "The lawyers insisted on some nominal amount to make it official." Sarah stared at him, speechless. This was beyond generous, beyond anything she could have imagined. "I don't understand," she finally. "Why would you do this?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Walter replied simply. "Harlow's belongs in the hands of someone who loves it, who understands what it means to this community. That's you, Sarah. Not me. I'm just passing through, in the grand scheme of things. You're the one who will be here carrying it forward." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept," Walter encouraged. "Say you'll continue the tradition of making Harlow's a place where people feel welcome, where kindness is served alongside the food." "Of course I will," Sarah whispered, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the gift, not just the diner itself, but the trust Walter was placing in her. Lisa reached over and squeezed her sister's hand, her own eyes glistening. "This is incredible, Walter. Truly." Walter nodded, his expression softening. "There's something else. A selfish request, if you'll indulge me." "Anything," Sarah said immediately. "I'd like to be a regular," Walter said, a trace of vulnerability in his voice that Sarah hadn't heard before. not as the owner or investor or benefactor, just as Walter, the old man who comes in for coffee and conversation a few times. I've found that I've missed that kind of simple connection in my life. The request touched Sarah deeply. Behind the billionaire businessman, behind the generous benefactor, was simply a man looking for community, for belonging, the very things Harlow's had always provided at its best. "You'll always have a place at Harlow's," Sarah assured him. "The corner booth is yours whenever you want it." Walter smiled, genuine pleasure lighting his features. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They sat in companionable silence as night fully descended, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the distant rumble of occasional traffic. It was Lisa who finally broke the quiet. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she asked. "How different things would be if you hadn't given Walter that meal." "Sarah, if you'd followed the rules instead of your heart." Sarah nodded, the realization striking her anew. One small act of kindness, one moment of choosing compassion over policy, had altered the course of not just her life, but Lisa's, Walter's, and the entire community that depended on Harlow's. "It's like ripples in a pond," Walter observed. "You never know how far they'll spread or what shores they'll eventually touch." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Harlow's Diner celebrated its grand reopening under its new official ownership. Sarah had insisted on the ceremony, wanting to mark the occasion properly. The entire town seemed to have turned out, filling the diner and spilling onto the sidewalk outside. Mayor Thompson cut the ribbon stretched across the entrance, voice booming over the crowd as he praised the diner's revival as a symbol of Riverdale's resilient spirit. Manny and his kitchen team had outdone themselves, preparing a feast of Harlow's classics and new specialties. Donna, now the head waitress and Sarah's right hand, coordinated the staff with effortless efficiency. Lisa, looking healthier than she had in years thanks to Dr. Abernathy's treatment program, helped serve coffee, her nursing textbooks temporarily set aside for the celebration. She was thriving in her courses, already talking about specializing in autoimmune disorders to help others with conditions like hers, and Walter sat at his usual spot in the corner booth, observing the festivities with quiet satisfaction. He came in 3 or 4 times a week now, sometimes for meals, sometimes just for coffee and conversation. He'd become a beloved fixture, known for his generous tips, his willingness to listen, and occasionally his wise counsel for anyone who sought it. Sarah made her way through the crowded diner to his booth, sliding in across from him with a tired but happy sigh. "Successful turnout, wouldn't you say?" "Beyond successful," Walter agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "George Harlow would be proud, as would my mother." Sarah nodded, touched by the mention of the people who had made Harlow special for Walter so many years ago. "I think they would be." Walter glanced around at the bustling diner, at the community gathered within its walls. "You know, in business, we're taught to measure success in profits and growth. But the real measure is this," he gestured, "people laughing, eating, sharing stories together. Human connection, community, the things money can't buy but that make life worth living." Sarah followed his gaze, taking in the scene. The O'Malley family in their usual booth, the children now healthy and thriving. Mrs. F. Petrovich in her knitting circle, needles clicking as they gossip. Officer Martinez enjoying his day off with his wife. Even Richard Jenkins had returned eventually, humbled and sober, now a quiet presence at the counter a few mornings a week. "It all started with a meal," Sarah said softly, remembering that fateful afternoon when she'd followed her instinct to feed a hungry old man. "And it continues with each one you serve," Walter replied. "That's the beauty of kindness. It never truly ends. It just changes form, finds new expression." As if on cue, a young woman entered the diner, hesitant and clearly down on her luck. Sarah recognized the look she'd worn at herself not so long ago. Without a word, she slid out of the booth and approached the woman with a menu and a smile, leading her to an empty table. Walter watched, his heart full, as Sarah signaled to Manny in the kitchen with a small nod, the same silent instruction she'd given for Walter months ago. A meal would appear, regardless of the woman's ability to pay. The circle was complete. The ripples continued to spread.